So, good evening and welcome everyone to our third Four Women, Four Decades event. Can't quite believe that this has all been happening since lockdown, which is very exciting. And we're delighted to have you here with us today. If this is your first time attending one of our events, then let me introduce myself. I'm Rebecca and I'm joined by Rachel, Natalie and my daughter Bea. And you're going to hear from everybody throughout the evening. And thank you for taking some time out of your day to be with us this evening or this morning or this afternoon, wherever you are. So just before we get underway, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping, just to say that everybody's muted except the four of us, because then it's kind of reduces all the background noise of dogs barking and whatever happening. So, and we've also got the chat function off at the moment. Again, that's a kind of distraction thing. So later on the second half, we're going to be opening up that chat function for you to put in comments, any questions that you might have as well. So that's the kind of housekeeping bit. I also would like to take a moment to acknowledge where we are in time right now. History is being made, certainly in the last 2 weeks, since everything that's happening with the Black Lives Matter movement. And I, for one, have had a massive wake-up call. And I know that I also speak for Bea, Rachel and Natalie. We're not going to be pressing pause, which is one of the things that I've seen, one of these pictures, you know, it's like the white community had been, we're calling this a wake-up call, but we're not prepared to press pause anymore and go back to sleep. So we're educating ourselves and recognizing the privilege we have and how unconsciously our bias has affected so many lives. And also we're still in the middle of a pandemic, again, which is affecting so many people, especially those in the BAME communities across the globe. So just wanted to acknowledge that where we are at the moment. And what we, Four Women, Four Decades, share is universal. And this evening we are really, really excited to be talking to you about confidence and self-esteem. Actually, we're pretty passionate about this subject, and we have weekly calls, the four of us, and we were sharing the other week about what we all wanted to talk about this evening. And we all actually had a good old cry while we were sharing. We feel so passionate about it. So we're hoping to have it a little more together this evening. But you have been warned because it's something that we do feel so passionate about. So if this is your first time with us, then you are very welcome, as I said. And if you've been with us before, then you kind of know what to expect. We're going to be having honest, raw conversation about confidence and self-esteem. And while we often feel a lack of it, we're going to be exploring what confidence is and what it isn't. We're going to be looking at something called imposter syndrome and why it's so common. And we're also going to be shining a spotlight on something that I mentioned last time in our talk, which is about what I call the unreliable narrator. So all of those stories that we make up and that innocently sabotage our efforts and how we show up in the world. So I'm going to be kicking off this evening. And I want to start off by reading something to you that I had on the fridge in my kitchen when Bea and her brothers were growing up. And it's something that you may well have heard or read yourself. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And that was written by Marianne Williamson in her book, A Return to Love. It was also used by Nelson Mandela as part of his inauguration speech. And you may well have come across it in a number of films. And it's so interesting because when I was thinking about what I wanted to share today, that just popped straight into my head. Because although that was on the fridge when the children were growing up, I wish I'd known that. I wish I had known that when I was younger, because my life, the first half of my life would have looked very, very different. As it was, I spent the first, up until my early 40s, frightened. I was frightened of everything. I was frightened of being rejected. I was frightened of having an opinion. I was frightened of other people's opinions. I was so self-conscious as a teenager, as a child and a teenager. Somebody would just look at me and I would blush. I was just in this, just thinking about it now, it feels really strong still, that feeling of not being good enough, not just not wanting to make a fuss, not wanting to make people angry. Just, I kept myself small, smaller and smaller and smaller. And that was so real for me that when I came to think about what I might want to do when I grew up, I'd love to have been a teacher. But the thought of standing up in front of a classroom of children just terrified me. I struggled at university when we had to do seminars and I had to present something. It just terrified me. And even careers that it didn't even cross my mind to consider, like law or being a journalist, where I might have to have an opinion and again stand up. They just weren't even on my radar. It wasn't even something that, it just wasn't possible for me. And I deferred to so many people in my life. My mum, for one, friends, anybody who had more confidence than me. I did it in relationships. So I always took a back seat. I always felt other people had more to say. Their opinion was more valuable than me. And I don't know whether that resonates with people here. I'm sure I'm not the only one. And above all, I mean, as I kind of alluded to, I had a pathological fear of being seen in public. So public speaking was just absolutely not an option. And there were times, of course, that I had to do it, and I'd be sick for days beforehand. And I just made sure I avoided any of those situations where I had to do something like that. So I kept quiet and I hid my light, as Marianne Williamson talks about in that piece. But you know, it's interesting because there was something inside me that knew I was missing something. There was just that little something inside. And it's easier for me now to look back and see it. But there were areas in my life where I was confident, but I just didn't call it confidence. I've never questioned my, I want to say, skill as a parent. I've never questioned my parenting. And it, for those of you that know and have been on the course before or know the work that Bea and I do together, Bea had an eating disorder, so parenting wasn't a doddle. But I never questioned my confidence in that. And also the things that I was good at, I learned not to, did I learn it? I'm not sure. I didn't go in for false modesty, so things that I can do, and you know, dressmaking and those kind of craft things, you know, I would say thank you when somebody said something. So there was a confidence there, rather than, oh no, well, that old thing, yeah, but you look at the mistakes I've made in it. I never did that. So there was a confidence there somewhere. And so slowly, and I think it kind of started, so I started my coach training about 14 years ago. So we're looking mid-40s here. And slowly I began to unpick all of those beliefs that I'd had about what confidence was and what self-esteem was. And then there are two things that literally changed the course of my life and my views about myself. And one of those was the biggest standing up for, and I'm going to cry now, the biggest standing up for myself that I'd ever done in my life. And that was standing in the kitchen, facing B's dad, my then husband, saying that I wanted a divorce. It was hard, but it was right. And in a way, there was no question that I was going to do that. I needed to do that. I wanted to do that. So I was, for the first time in my life, standing up for myself and for what I wanted. And the second thing that happened shortly after that was that I let go of the belief that I was small and that I had nothing to say. And I wrote a book. And the right at the start of the book, there's a quote by Anais Nin, and you may know it, and it says, "And the time came when the risk to remain tight in the bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom." And that is one of the most powerful quotes for me in my life, because, you know, the words of Glennon Doyle, who we all have a bit of a crush on, talks about we can do hard things. Okay. And sometimes that's standing up for ourselves and actually seeing that we are confident, that we were confident all along, and that we do have the self-esteem. So I was thinking about, you know, a question that you might have is, well, but what changed? How did you go from having such little confidence to being able to do those things? And I think, and that's, you know, and I did talk about this last time, but it was this thing called the unreliable narrator. This narrative that we've got going on in our heads, which is telling us untruths. And we can choose to begin to hear that and recognize it, and choose to question whether we want to keep believing that stuff that's holding us back from showing up, being ourselves, and shining our light, because that's what we're here to do. So I'm going to hand you over to Bea now. And I know that she and I have probably got a little bit to share together.
Thank you. Yeah, gosh, I mean, I've known you for 27 years, and like the difference that I've seen in you since you've had those realizations has been huge. So I'm going to try and hold it together as well. So my understanding of confidence and self-esteem has changed hugely over the last few years. And a lot of what Mum said really is what I've experienced as well. I used to think that confidence was being an extrovert. It was the person who talked the loudest in meetings. It was always speaking your mind. It was never being nervous. And I kind of saw it as this shield or kind of fort that you had to kind of build up around yourself. And I also thought that if you were all those things, it also meant that you were more competent. So by these definitions, I was neither of those things. I was neither confident nor competent, because I just I just didn't see myself in any of those descriptions that I've just listed. And for a long time, I'd feel anxious all the time. And I thought that that anxiety meant that I was fundamentally not a confident person, that confidence wasn't in my DNA. And it's kind of like I was almost barred entry from that kind of confident club of people, because for whatever reason, it just didn't occur to me that the people I saw as confident could also feel anxious. And at that time, I so felt like I was lacking in some way, and that I needed to work really hard to kind of build up my confidence and fix this lacking that I felt. And really similarly to what Mum was just saying, I would constantly question everything I did because I did not trust my own judgments and abilities. I wasn't listening to that gut feeling that we all had. I just did not trust it. And this led to feelings of severe imposter syndrome, because I was constantly asking myself, who am I? Who am I to offer my opinion? Who am I to try and make a difference? Who am I to try and put myself out there in the world? And I remember so clearly, several years ago, I remember someone I used to go to university with being on TV and radio talking about an issue that she was campaigning about. And I was in total awe. And I only remember this yesterday, it kind of popped into my head. I was in total awe because I wanted to be able to do that. I wanted to be able to put myself out there and not be afraid of judgment, of embarrassment, or kind of all those things that seem to go with it. And I think that just for me, that kind of reinforced the idea I had in my head that I wasn't a confident person. I wasn't the sort of person who could do those things. It just didn't seem like a possibility at all. And so I ended up until pretty recently, I ended up putting these kinds of people, these confident people that I looked up to, on pedestals. And I would look to them for advice and answers, again, really similar to what Mum was just saying, because I genuinely thought they knew better. I thought that they had all the answers and I didn't. But again, I think it was me not listening to that gut feeling, or getting out of the habit of listening, kind of tuning into that inner wisdom we all have. And so, like, when I was thinking about what I wanted to say this evening, and kind of reflecting on how it felt at the time, and again, like this wasn't that long ago, it made me feel very small and very powerless, because I just didn't feel like I had the confidence or the ability to be anyone or make any kind of impact. So yeah, I was playing small, and I didn't think that there was an alternative. I just thought that was kind of programmed into my DNA. And I mean, when I was younger, as Mum said, I had anorexia, where I was literally trying to make myself as small as possible. And I was just so afraid to stand out and be seen. Again, I rarely shared my opinion because I just didn't think I had one. I would panic. Like, even when my dad asked me my opinion at the dinner table, I would panic because I just didn't know what to say. It was like I didn't have a voice, or again, I just didn't trust it. And I think that was a reflection of a huge amount of self-judgment, and also a lack of self-belief that I was experiencing at the time. And that went on for a long time, kind of on and off for a long time. Like, when I started a new job several years ago, I felt so unconfident, and that made me feel, as I said earlier, it made me feel incompetent, and it caused, gosh, so much anxiety. And when someone asked me for advice, I would always get a second opinion, always, even though 99% of the time they'd always agree with me. But again, I wasn't trusting that instinct, that common sense that I had. And yeah, I thought those people knew better. But over the last few years, I've started to see confidence in a slightly different way, and it's had a big impact. So now what I see is that it's not actually something that we necessarily have to go out and get. It's not something that we have to necessarily go out on a training course. I'm sure many of you have been on those kind of training courses you get sent on to build your confidence. And again, I wonder why I get the idea that it's this kind of fort that you have to build around yourself. But instead, the way I see it now anyway, is it's actually something that we all have by default. But what happens is that sometimes it just gets covered over by that lack of self-belief, self-doubt, anxious thinking. It might be comments from other people. And seeing it as this kind of base layer that we all have, that we can all come back to, is something that never leaves us. It's just, we lose sight of it. And that's had a huge impact for me. And I've also realized that it's less about being loud and outgoing, more about having a kind of, what feels to me anyway, like a kind of a groundedness. It's almost like if you imagine like the image of a big tree with deep roots that isn't as easily knocked over in the storm. It kind of feels like that kind of self-assuredness. And it's kind of an inner trusting in yourself as well, and knowing yourself and your values and sticking to them. And again, that's something that I just so got out of the habit of doing. So for me, instead of, as I say, confidence being something you have to go out and get, it kind of feels now more of a kind of stripping back. It's, when I was thinking about what to say, and we talk a lot in metaphor, but the idea of taking off like a really heavy coat that's been weighed down with self-beliefs, or kind of unhelpful thinking, all the labels that we accumulate throughout our life, and just being able to kind of take that weight off, rather than it being confidence being the coat that we have to put on. So actually it's kind of quite counterintuitive almost, but that, yeah, unloading all the unhelpful things that we've been carrying around that have been getting in the way of us seeing our own confidence. And I mean, it's been quite a gradual process for me, but the difference it's now made is that I know now I don't panic so much that I'm incompetent when I get nervous. I mean, I get so nervous before these talks, but I don't take it as a sign that I can't or shouldn't do them. And that's been massive for me. It's also made me realize that I don't need to worry about needing to be the loudest person in the room, or speaking up in meetings just for the sake of proving that I can be confident, or I am that kind of person. And actually, like, I can totally see how actually the loudest person in the room can also be the most insecure. Like, I'm sure we've all come across those people. So I've kind of stopped making that connection between the two so much now. And I think the last thing that I've kind of noticed that's different is that now when I want to feel more confident, I look at what might be getting in the way rather than looking at what I need to add on. Again, with the kind of the heavy coat analogy. What is it? What unhelpful stories are going on in my head that are saying that I'm not good at my job, I haven't got anything helpful to say, I'm not qualified enough, and just kind of giving myself permission to let those go and just not read so much into them. And I think knowing all of this has also made me a lot calmer. And I've told that I come across a lot calmer than I used to, because without sounding too cliched, I kind of see much more clearly now that I'm enough as I am and that I'm not actually lacking in any way. And I mean, what a relief that there isn't this massive kind of part of me that's missing. And it's also just that I'm so much more trusting of my own instincts and judgments now. And I've relearned how to kind of listen to that inner wisdom or gut feeling, whatever you want to call it. And because that's where the answers lie, essentially. They're not out there, they're not coming from someone else and their own experience. It's just listening into that kind of inner deep knowing that we do all have. But I think a lot of us just get out of the habit of actually listening to it. So the kind of one thing I wanted to leave you with was kind of a question. And if you're sitting there asking yourself, what do I need to do to become more confident? I think that maybe a more helpful question to consider might actually be, what can I let go of to get closer to my natural state of confidence? And that might feel totally counterintuitive and just contrary to everything that you've ever been taught, but it's been so incredibly helpful for me, and it's just something to consider. So that's all I kind of had to say. So I'll hand over to Ashley.
Thank you. Wow, I just loved hearing all that, Bea, and so much of what you said resonated with me. And and my experience too has been seeing more that actually for me to experience confidence, I need to look in the direction of what's getting in its way, as opposed to adding more. And I guess if I paint a bit of a before and after picture of what's gone on for me and my journey with confidence and self-esteem, is that I also used to believe that some confidence was something I needed to build and grow, something that I lacked. I don't think anyone outside would have thought I lacked confidence. Like in my 20s and 30s, I think a lot of people would have perceived me as a confident person. But behind the scenes, it didn't feel that smooth. And my answer to feeling more confident was in the acquisition of tools and techniques and strategies, and learning and working on my areas of development. And it was always about kind of adding. And I was highly critical of myself and the things that I felt I still needed to do to be effective, and hence was born the perfectionist in me, I suppose. Not wanting to make a mistake, wanting to do the right thing, wanting every endeavour I put my mind to be good, and for me to feel confident and feel ready. And my answer was to just prepare lots. So in order for me to feel confident, I used to just do inordinate amount of preparation, anticipating the things that could occur and putting myself in a position where in that moment there wouldn't be the unknowns. I would I would have almost script-like rehearsed, you know, workings out of what I, you know, what I needed to do. And this was a really exhausting way to live, really, because I would, you know, and I would, you know, I was massively into reading self-help literature and wanting to develop myself. But when I looked in that direction, all I saw more about my inadequacies and lackings and things I needed to do. And I tried to fill those gaps with tools and techniques and working on myself. And arguably, I've always loved growing and learning, but it was coming from a place where I was looking outside of me at other experts or people I admired at work and trying to be more like them, because that seemed like how I would be more confident, as opposed to just trying to be more Natalie. And yeah, and I guess because I didn't have this kind of trust in myself, in the moment, in the unknown, to come up with the goods, I would just kind of prepare and try and get everything just so and perfect. And yeah, and everyone outside would have really seen Natalie's so on it, she's on the ball, you know, and arguably I was very successful. I had a good corporate career, and, you know, was high in all the performance kind of measures that I put myself to. But behind the scenes, I was a very busy bunny and a very tired bunny. And I, you know, kind of went up the career ladder, and I, in my kind of last, you know, one of my last corporate roles before moving into having my own business, I remember such a terrible imposter syndrome that I experienced that was crippling and had me on the edge of burnout, really, because I just had to keep or felt I had to just keep learning more, keeping up, not being a fraud, you know, acting like I knew what I was doing, and inside I was floundering. I remember like having my bowl of cereal in the morning and just bursting into tears, just trying to cope with all this. And yeah, it's like, you know, because I felt I wasn't equipped to do what I needed to do in my role. But, you know, it was all perception. It was insecurity. It was all the expectations I'd put on myself. So much pressure I'd put on myself. And it stemmed from, you know, believing the insecure thinking. Believing the unreliable narrator that Rebecca talks about, believing the, you know, the internal chatter that told me I wasn't good enough. So yeah, and I believed it. Like when I had, you know, was listening to that, I just believed it. And then so what my answer was, my coping mechanisms of preparing more and learning more and equipping myself, because I didn't want to feel the insecure feelings. I didn't want to feel not ready. So to feel ready, I did my coping mechanisms, you know, and I acted as if, you know, I remember saying affirmations, looking in a mirror, and I can do this, I'm confident, you know, trying to believe it. And so that was about trying to add things and bolt on things to help me cope. And what I've come to see, and it's taken to being in my 40s really to see it. So how awesome for B that she's in her 20s and is seen through some of this chatter. But yeah, confidence was always there. And I truly believe this. we have a natural confidence. We see it when we see toddlers learning to walk. They get back up, they're excited, they're enthused, they want to do something, and over the course of our lives we kind of unlearn some of that confidence, or don't see it quite so clearly, because we acquire certain thinking and patterns and habits, and we kind of acquire thinking that gets in our way. And the thing is, I think what I've seen, which is really transformational for me, which has really just helped so massively, is, before, the reason I found all these coping strategies is because I didn't want to feel the feeling of insecurity. So I needed to fix that. And what I really see clearly now is those feelings of insecurity are just around for the journey. It's part of life. It's part of the spectrum of emotions we get. It's normal. It's natural. It's not a reflection that I'm not capable. Like, I totally believe those feelings meant I wasn't ready, so I needed to prepare more. And I just don't see that to be true now. I just see that those feelings are informing me that my state of mind has dropped, and I'm having some nervous thinking or fearful thinking. That's okay. Doesn't mean I don't need to move forward in what I'm doing. And like B, before these talks, I experience nerves. But the thing is, before, I would have experienced nerves and thought, well, I'm not ready, so I can't do that, or I need to do more stuff before I can put myself forward for that. And now I just see that the fear is there for the journey. And the quicker we learn to just see that that's okay, and we can move forward regardless, and the less we take notice of it, the quicker it dissolves. And I love Elizabeth Gilbert writes in Big Magic, she says this thing about having fear along for the journey, and it's referring to the creative process. But she basically kind of writes this letter to fear and says, like, I know you're on this journey, but you are in the back seat. You're not fiddling with the dials, like she's talking about driving. And you can chunter along all you want, but I'm the one that's driving, and I love that. So I have my chuntering backseat driver, and it crops up still frequently, but I know it doesn't mean I'm not confident. It just means I'm having insecure thinking, and that has been huge. It's been so huge. So I encourage you to investigate that. I now feel, because of learning that, and because of just really seeing that confidence is just more natural than I ever thought, and because I need to look in the direction of what B says as what to let go of first before thinking about adding, I can just trust more to just be present and show up. And from that place, I actually am better equipped to deal with whatever circumstances in front of me, much more than the prepared Natalie of old would have. I fared well and was successful, but I believe my impact now as a human being and my contribution in all the things I touch, it just comes from a more real place, a more vulnerable place. Like, I haven't got it all sussed. But that's okay. Like, that is so huge for me. Like, I don't need to know it all, and that's okay. And I recently, this week, came across a word I didn't know before, which I think sums it up nicely, which is flawsome. So, like, I'm awesome, and I embrace my flaws. And not in like a real big-headed way, just in a really human way. So I'm looking at my notes. Was there anything else I wanted to say? Yeah, just one thing, because I haven't talked much about self-worth, but you know, in the root of all where I went wrong a bit in this is that I'd somehow got my achievements tangled up with my self-worth. And from that premise, I was always just not feeling safe. Because the you know, it just felt rocky ground, isn't it? You know, if you have to kind of achieve and do certain things in the world and always be confident for you to be worthy. And I've just seen that that's a nonsense. Like, as human beings, we have self-worth, you know, nothing to do with achievement. So I'm looking forward to handing over to Rachel now, because she has a different story, but just as transformational. So on that, I'll let you say more, Rachel.
Build up. Thank you, Natalie. She's got one of those faces, hasn't she? I could listen to Natalie, well, all of them, but I could listen to Natalie all day. There's just this lovely warmth about you. I could, yeah, do that for longer. Thank you. I have had a different experience, a strange experience with confidence, and kind of a flipped experience, if you like. So I was raised by a very outwardly confident mother, phenomenal woman. We all miss her, for those who are on the call who know her, but she, you know, she could talk to anyone and did. She had absolutely no filter, which is one of the things I loved about her. And what it led to was, when I was young, I was just forever encouraged. And so I never saw or understood what not having confidence would look like, or even realized I was confident. I didn't hold back. I always volunteered. I always had a big mouth. I've still got a big mouth. You know, I always had an opinion. I always got involved in the conversation. Lots of things. I had star roles in the plays and soloists at Christmas shows, and it didn't really faze me. My mum was a singer. I could sing. It was just very normal how we lived. And so I continued to put my hand up and not question what I was doing so much. And I was never told anything like, you know, be quiet, or so I never really knew that anything I was doing would not be acceptable or welcome in certain places. So as I grew, I then entered, long story short, entered corporate world, and it became very clear that people had a very strong impression about who I was and how appropriate I was or was not being. So I'd received comments over the years, my first few roles in big companies, big corporate banks and law firms, and I'd receive quieter comments like, oh, you have a lot of opinions for somebody so young, or, oh, aren't you nervous? You're going in to speak to somebody who's very senior, very important. Or I was asked on one of my exit interviews, one of my first jobs. I didn't get the sack because I was too loud, but I was asked in this interview, the head wants to see you because he wants to know about the girl who has all of the opinions. That was one of my first comments. And then when I started developing my own and just getting a sense of, actually, I've got some stuff to say and I'm going to say it. I would get comments from, even after I started my own business 5 years ago, you know, Rachel, you seem very confident. You know, like almost like, just be careful. And one of my favorite comments that I got was, you know, maybe you're a bit too polished. So over the years, and the older I've become, and the more successful, if you want to term it that way, but the more interactions I've been in, the more businesses I've interacted with, it's been interesting over the years to see who reacts to me and in what way they react. So for a few years, probably in my late 20s, as I'd been in corporate world for a few years, I felt myself beginning to say a bit less, or can I put my hand up here, and kind of second guess myself. And I did that for a while, and I knew it wasn't right, and I knew it wasn't me, because I usually have something to say. So to be quiet for a very long amount of time would probably get me a little bit in trouble. So a few things happened, big life-changing things happened. One of the biggest ones being my mum passed away, and I was 31 and I'm 39 now. And, you know, just in that moment of going, you're not too big. You have a voice. Every single person has a voice. It's a big subject for me. So cut forward, what the shift of those changes and the shift of developing my business and really understanding that even if some people don't want to hear my opinion, I mean, I would never speak over somebody, I'd never be rude, and I really try my best to always listen. But if I have something to say, I'm very driven to say it. And what's brilliant about noticing what I'm noticing now is I care what you all think of me, but I actually care a lot less about what you think about that. So if somebody tells me I'm loud or I have lots of views or opinions, I thank them. And I don't seek to go into that any further. I just think, well, yeah. And I have more. And if you need more, I've got some more as well. And, you know, also some days I'm really quiet. And some days I don't put my hand up, and also that's okay. So just probably in the last couple of years in particular, I just feel more okay with whatever it is I put out there and whatever it is I get back. So when I was thinking about this, it was, if you are inspired to say something, or if you want to put your hand up, then do that. And one of my clients recently described that she was going to do something she was a bit nervous about, and she said, so I just put my big girl pants on and I went and did it. And that's kind of what it feels like now. It's like, you know, we're grown-ups, we've got some brilliant things to say, let's go and do that. And what's been lovely in the last year in particular is just starting to relax a lot more, actually, about saying what I want and when I want to, within, you know, I wouldn't want to hurt anybody's feelings or be insensitive, but I'm just much more at peace knowing that I will have something to say. It is likely I'm going to put my hand up, and I'm not too big, and I can do that. And that's been my journey.
I love that, Rachel. I love that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that that I think we can share with the group is we've got our WhatsApp group. So we have our weekly calls, and we've got our WhatsApp group, and we share lots of stuff in that. But one of the things we don't allow in the group are the words "I'm sorry," because it's so easy for us, not exclusively, but I think for women, it's something that we often lead with, "I'm sorry," or even words that sound like "I'm sorry," that have been couched differently, but the kind of essence is there. And I love this, that what Rachel has shared, which is completely different to my experience and what Bea and Natalie have said, is that why should she apologize for who she is and to be small? This is going right back to what I said at the beginning, isn't it? About our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. But actually, yeah, we're here to shine our light. So Natalie, I think you're going to, how are we doing for time? Yeah, so we've got about 10 minutes or so. Natalie's going to switch on the chat. So if there's anything that comes to mind that you'd like to share, a reflection or a question, then do write something down. We're going to capture everything anyway, so if we don't get to everything, then we will be addressing it at some point. And while Natalie's doing that, just kind of want to reflect back really on what we've been sharing this evening and kind of our key messages. And the first one being that Bea spoke about confidence isn't something that we need to build. It's not something we need to go out and get or train ourselves in, or as she talked about, building this fort around us, you know, to give us the strength to be confident. Confidence is what's naturally within us when we drop the stories. the stuff that, you know, seeing it as a default. And as Natalie said, it's that effortless, natural self-belief and confidence that a toddler has when they're learning to walk. You know, they don't fall down the first time and go, oh, clearly walking's not for me. I just don't have the confidence to do that. They just get up, fall down, get up, fall down, get up, fall down until they are up more than they're down, and then move on to the next thing. And I think if you can, you know, if you take that away this evening, just to consider and reflect and get curious on how that is in your life as well. Taking off the coat, as Bea talked about. I love that metaphor because it's heavy, that big winter coat. Take that off and see that natural confidence and self-esteem that's there. And the second one that Natalie was talking about as well is that vulnerability and being comfortable with not knowing. You know, the more, I love being able to say I don't know. Now, didn't used to, because that I felt reflected on my competence, as Bea spoke about. But just to be able to say I don't know, I think that's wonderful if we can do that. So the more we are ourselves, showing up truly as ourselves, the more we can see that confidence was there all along. And when we were having a chat last week, Natalie said something which I loved and wrote down. It's, you know, she talked about the more I can turn up as Natalie or Rebecca or whoever it is, turn that dial up on being Rebecca, I can turn that dial down on the unreliable narrator, because that's not true. How are we doing?
Yeah, so I've got well, there's a number of questions which I'm going through to see what themes there are, but there's a first one I will give to you. Emma asks, how do you manage your confidence in what can feel like a man's world, especially in the corporate world? So I don't know if one of you can speak to that.
Rachel and Bea, I think.
I will. I have to say. True to form, here she comes. Isn't it fascinating? And particularly in the last, I mean, a lot of my clients are male in the corporate world as well, struggling to perform in this arena where it is important if you put your hand up. It is viewed in some places by, you know, the powers that be, that your ability to make your presence known in meetings will impact whether or not you stand up and get up for promotion. And when I first started out in banking 20 years ago, the message was certainly, you know, graceful, be a woman, don't hide who you are, and yet make sure you, in the same kind of conversation, make sure you make your point and make sure you articulate and put your hand up. And so I think women are just have been in this strange place where it's like, well, am I supposed to put my hand up now? Am I not? Am I going for promotion now? Am I not? And there's lots of mixed messages. I would say the more honest conversations we have in the corporate world, which is happening more and more people are just saying, we don't want to live in this culture where I might be measured by how many times I put my hand up or by how many times I speak up in a meeting. And actually, confidence is, can we have a peaceful and productive conversation, and I will speak when the time is right, or I will make a contribution when I have one, and not feel that I need to make a contribution in many law firms and organizations because I'm being looked at so that I do have one. This element of performing rather than just speaking when you need to speak. That's my experience anyway.
Bea, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's kind of echoing what I said earlier as well. I think also what I've found is that, so I work I'm a coach, but I'm also currently working in the civil service. So I haven't necessarily had the kind of corporate experience that Rachel's had. But what I find is that what I do now is I see people more as human beings now, rather than the big scary senior boss or the man or the woman or whatever it might be. All those kind of labels, again, like the confident one in the room, or the quiet one, or the insecure one, or the loudmouth, or whoever it is. And seeing, I guess, kind of seeing past that more, and actually connecting more human to human without sounding too kind of hippie about it. But I think well, from my own experience, I used to be terrified of even getting in the lift with a very senior person, because I didn't know what to say. Again, going back to the whole opinions thing, I didn't know what to say and what they think of me if I said the wrong thing. But now I got great relationships with some really senior people, because it's seeing past that label, or that kind of the characteristics that we've kind of labeled others with. So I labeled very senior people as intimidating and unapproachable and terrifying, but actually they're none of those things. That was only, again, it was a kind of a story that I was creating in my mind. So I found it helpful to try and kind of consciously do that as well, actually just remind myself that they're just people.
That's lovely. I'm wondering, it's 3 minutes to the hour. Should we squeeze in one more question and then go to close? Yeah. Okay. So sorry, because we're not going to get time for every question, but maybe we can think about how we can address some of the questions in something moving forward. But one for you, Rachel. Someone really resonated with your story about your experience of confidence, and then kind of almost trying to moderate yourself. What's happened to Louise now is, after moderating herself for a long time, she's now being told that she's being too reluctant to take credit, not assertive enough. So a bit of a cycle there happening. How am I supposed to just trust my own judgment? And I don't know how to break this cycle. Any tips?
Yeah. Well, after being quieter than you would have ordinarily been for a while, it's quite fun to notice when you're in those rooms and you're not saying anything, and to hear the chatter that will come in, which is the fear saying, you really need to speak now. This is exactly what they're looking at. You're not saying a thing. Just say thank you to that one and move that one aside, and then think about anything that you could add at this point that is going to add value to the conversation. Or one of the things I do when I'm really stuck and I really want to talk is I summarize at the very end what's been said so far. It does something about demonstrating confidence, which means that actually most of us, for most of the time in these meetings, aren't listening. So if you have the ability to just wrap up what's been said over the 30 minutes, people will remember you, and then it seems that you get invited to more meetings because no one's listening anymore. But no, I would ignore the chatter, because you'll be so aware of what you're not saying that will detract your attention to what you could be saying if you just listened, relaxed, and just let something valuable come through, which absolutely will once you turn that chatter off. And in time it does become quieter. It doesn't go away, sadly, but it does reduce its volume, and something valuable will be there for you to say. And to trust that, I mean, for now, just take a whole bucket of trust from this group and this community. But when you're there, if you start to relax into it, something will come for you to say. And then you'll just start doing it more and more. I hope that's useful.
So I feel like, thank you so much everyone for your questions. And as Natalie said, we will do our best to try and answer those in whatever way we can. So, and thank you so much for joining. We can't quite believe that this is our third one already. They seem to come around really, really quickly, and we love doing them, and we love having you all join. So thank you so much. I also wanted to say thank you for everyone who completed the survey that we sent around recently, which was kind of asking people's views on what you want to see more of, what you'd like us to do in the future. So based on that feedback, what we're really excited to announce is that 2 weeks from today, we're going to be starting a 4-week kind of deep dive into stress and anxiety. So we'll be sending out an email tomorrow with a recording from today, but also with details on how you can sign up for that. So we're thrilled that there is such appetite for more, and we as you can probably tell, we can talk about this stuff for hours, and we really love doing it. We have a lot to share, and we're keen also just to kind of create this kind of community of sharing and learning from each other. I mean, we say it all the time, but just to reiterate, we haven't got it all sussed. We really don't. So just a reminder that we're not kind of experts here who have all the answers, but we've just kind of seen a few things a bit differently that have changed our lives quite dramatically, and we're keen to kind of help other people see that as well. So keep an eye out for those emails. The information will also be on our website. If you're not already part of our Facebook group, then please do have a look at that as well. We've got almost 200 members, I think, which is just amazing. So thank you everyone for kind of making that such a lively place to be. I think that's everything. Yeah. Thank you so much again, and we will see you at the next one. We will be continuing these monthly, kind of every 4 to 6 weeks or so, monthly calls. So hope to see you at the next one.
Thank you